Hello, my name is Toby Heaps. I'm the CEO of Corporate Knights, and it's my pleasure to welcome everyone. Just as we get underway, as is customary in Canada, where we're broadcasting from today, I'm going to make a brief land acknowledgement. So first, I'd like to welcome everyone. Corporate Knights honors the people and the lands of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Corporate Knights acknowledges the land we are on as the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Corporate Knights also acknowledges that Toronto, where we are located, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So we're here today to celebrate the results of the Global 100 Most Sustainable Corporations in the World Ranking. It's the 18th edition of the Global 100. Usually we host this event in non-COVID times at a live dinner function during the World Economic Forum in Davos. This year, because of COVID, we're doing it virtually, which has the virtue of being able to share it with a broader audience. So hello, everyone who's joined us from all the continents around the world except for Antarctica. So in terms of the run of show today, we'll first hear from Professor Johan Rockstrom, who's the director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. And he'll talk about carbon reduction policy that he's helped to pioneer as a notion called the carbon law. And then we'll hear from the leaders of this year's Global 100 companies who will share with us the most important decisions they made in this past year to progress their greenhouse gas emission reductions, and also their wisdom for what political leaders can do to accelerate our action and close the safety gap. So first, just in terms of the Global 100 results, I'm happy to report that the latest analysis that has been done on the Global 100 Index by S&P Capital IQ and Solactive, who calculates it, shows that from its inception in 2005 to the end of 2021, December 31st, it has turned in at a total performance of 331% versus 279% for its blue chip benchmark, the MSCI All Country World Index, proving that it is possible for companies who do well to do better financially. And this is a trend that we've seen pick up with steam over the last few years, in particular, as we've placed more of the emphasis on the ranking on the core products and services and to the extent to which they're a function of solutions for climate change and other sustainable development goals. The Global 100 companies are setting an evolving standard for sustainability excellence that sets them apart from the almost 7,000 companies that were evaluated this year. Each year, one company stands out. And this year, that company, the #1 ranked company overall, whose CEO is with us, HENRIK, I'm pleased to report, is Vestas Wind Systems. So congratulations, HENRIK, for the great work you and your team have done, not just this year, but over the decades to build up such a world-class company. It's a pleasure to have you here today alongside your peers from both last year's top-ranked company, Schneider Electric, JEAN-PASCAL, and the previous year's top-ranked company, Ørsted, with Matt Nipper here. So I'm really happy that you can all join us today. So before we get underway with Professor Rockstrom's presentation, I wanted to share with you, take some time to introduce to you our esteemed speakers and everyone who's joined us with us today, a new tool that Corporate Knights has helped to formulate with input from global civil society and scientific experts to help to bring some stricter and clearer accountability around the tremendous commitments that have been made by countries and by companies at the aggregate level, so we can get a more accurate, clear sense on whether or not we're moving in the right direction and moving fast enough with respect to our climate goals. So we will be launching on Earth Day, April 22nd, an Earth Index, and that Earth Index will be focused on the countries with the most consequence for the trajectory of our future emissions and our current emissions, namely the G7 countries and the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. What we have done is just to kind of crystallize what the challenge is in terms of the annual rate of progress that's required to be made, not to reach Professor Rockstrom's carbon law, which is a higher bar, but just to deliver and follow through on the commitments that countries have made, the most ambitious commitments that countries have made recently, whether in Glasgow or the lead up to Glasgow. And so what we've done is we've calculated what those commitments have us on track for in 2030, and then figured out the annual rate of progress required to deliver on those commitments for each country and also for the group as a whole. And as you can see here from the Earth Index, we're currently not going in the right direction, and we're actually going backwards. So we need to be, each year, we need to be reducing our emissions by about 822 million tons. And in the most recent year for which we have data, our emissions went up by 256 million tons. Now you can see from the countries, it's a bit of a patchwork. Germany and Italy appear to be on track, but even in Germany's case, the most recent data that came out last week, it's for 1 year ahead of where this is, shows that Germany's emissions actually went up 4% last year. And Germany has announced emergency measures and is moving with a lot more sense of urgency and emergency now, because their emissions went up actually by 4% last year. And as they bring off their coal plants, there'll be challenges for them to integrate the renewables. Nothing that we can't solve, but it will take more resources and more focus than we're currently applying. And as you can see, we have to move much more quickly, even in the countries that are on track. Countries like Italy, which are doing interesting things where they're financing the entire cost of large retrofits for residential properties, upwards of 250,000 euros per property, 110% of the cost in some cases. Huge adoption. It's boosting their GDP growth, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. And that's the kind of level of ambition that we need to see, the material levels of ambition. So we'll be publishing this index at the aggregate level, and importantly, at the industry level, major sector level for each of the countries, and then pinpointing the changes that can be made in policy to really up the ante and pick up the pace of speed so that we can be on track across all major sectors and all major economies. And we'll be really looking forward to working with each of you, the Global 100 leaders, because almost no one has more credibility. You have the economic credibility, your companies are outperforming other companies, and you have the sustainability credibility because you're already showing how it's done, whether it's with the #1 company this year, which over the course of its lifetime, over the last couple of decades, has helped to avoid 1.6 billion tons of emissions through all the wind power that's been deployed. Each one of your companies is at the heart of solutions, and you have a lot of moral credibility and also real influence. And so we'll be looking forward to working with each of you and all of the Global 100 companies as a community to help companies do what they said they're going to do, help countries do what they said they're going to do, and follow through on their promises. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Johan Rockstrom. Dr. Rockstrom, who many of you will know from his work over the years, he was the primary person responsible for popularizing the planetary boundaries work, which is an effort to quantify our human impact on the planet and to tell us if we're pushing things too far in terms of the life-giving services, whether it's the ability to generate clean water or regulate temperatures or to grow food. And he's been at the epicenter of quantifying human impact on the planet. But much more importantly, he's also been one of the fiercest and most optimistic advocates for what we need to do to close that gap and for our species to live in harmony with the only home we have, planet Earth. So it's my real pleasure to introduce Professor Johan Rockstrom to provide us a bit of an overview of the carbon law. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Toby, and hello everyone. I'll be sharing my screen here. I hope you can see this now. So what I'd like to do in the next just few minutes is basically to provide the scientific support for Toby's introduction here, and provide the ample evidence we have of the crisis we're in, the urgency, the need to move in transformative, exponential pathways along what we call the carbon law, which we in the scientific community increasingly conclude means that we really need the Global 100 type momentum. We need to have role models of climate club actors, what I call keystone actors, showing not only at the frontier of what is possible, but also showing the benefits, the multiple benefits that you derive from that journey. We came to Glasgow following a pathway to disaster. Scientifically, this was well established. We were at best ending up at a 2.7 degrees Celsius global mean temperature rise by the end of this century, a place we haven't been in for the past 4 to 5 million years, potentially across the 2 degrees Celsius point, triggering multiple irreversible catastrophic tipping points that would basically commit all future generations to a potentially unmanageable future. We left Glasgow after a number of updates of NDCs, 90% of global emissions being connected to net zero pathways, an unprecedented methane pledge, an unprecedented 130 trillion US dollar financial alignment by Mark Carney et al., and a very significant pledge on deforestation towards a pathway to danger, meaning that we go from disaster to danger. If we deliver on everything we promised in Glasgow, we can hold just the 2 degrees Celsius mark, the warmest temperature on Earth over the past 3 million years. So we still have work to do. Just as Toby says, we've taken a big step forward. I would even argue we've turned a corner towards, the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. You represent to a large extent the most important drivers of that change, but there's still a lot to do. As Toby pointed out, yes, the global emissions are still rising, which is a big concern because the IPCC shows clear that the remaining global carbon budget is such a little sliver. It's up to, maximum 400-500 billion tons of carbon dioxide to hold at a 66% probability the 1.5 degrees Celsius line. We emit 40 billion tons per year, so we have less than 10 years left in current level of emissions, which means that this is the decisive decade. It's not the decade when we fall over a cliff, but it's the decade that will determine whether we'll be able to hold the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark. And I can tell you, not only from the IPCC, but from the battery of scientific evidence that is being published, has been published, and is in the pipeline, that we have more and more unequivocal scientific evidence that 1.5 is a true climate planetary boundary. Can we hold it? We have a good chance of avoiding crossing tipping points. We go beyond it and we enter a danger zone. So 1.5 is not only a political choice, it is a scientific necessity. How come? Well, it's because we have more and more science of this kind. We know of roughly 15 big tipping point systems in the Earth system that we know not only regulate the climate system, but also have multiple stable states separated by tipping points. This is the latest assessment of the 9 of those 15 that are showing signs of instability, meaning that they're showing a signs of approaching tipping points. But not only that, the arrows here are fundamental. We have more and more scientific evidence that's what's happening very fast in the Arctic Sea and ice melt in Greenland. We have a warming amplification with up to twice as high warming in the Northern Hemisphere than the global average. Is slowing down the overturning of heat in the North Atlantic, impacting on the monsoons over the Amazon rainforest, which can explain the higher frequency of fires and droughts, and the fact that the Brazilian part of the Amazon has already tipped over from being the world's single largest important terrestrial carbon sink to now being a carbon source. But it's also holding more surface water in the Southern Ocean, which can explain the accelerated melting in the West Antarctic ice shelf. We call this cascades. We have to keep an eye on this, and this is why we have launched the carbon law, meaning what's the path that we need to follow to keep the whole Earth system stable, staying within planetary boundaries? Well, one rule is shown here in gray, which is on fossil fuel phase out. We need to follow the carbon law inspired by the Moore's law, which goes as follows: cut emissions by half every decade, and we follow the innovation pathway that can give us a net zero world economy by mid-century. That is the pace of innovation transformation that we need to see on fossil fuels. But that's not enough. We need a food system transition from source to sink, shown here in the brown to orange wedge, and we need to keep all the carbon sinks in nature intact, shown here in green for land and blue in the ocean. And not even that is enough. We also need to start scaling negative emission technologies, shown in orange. So what we're facing over the next 10 to 20 years is a global sustainability transition to have a safe landing. That is what is at stake. And what you represent, again, is really the social tipping point of being able to make this journey inevitable, meaning the safe landing being the pathway towards a safe and just, prosperous and equitable future for humanity. And I think the Global 100, you represent a really incredibly important part of that journey. Back to you, Toby.
Thank you, Professor Rockstrom, for setting the stage for the next part of the discussion. So I'm going to ask one question. It's the same question for each of our 10 esteemed panelists here. And we'll start with HENRIK Andersen, the CEO of Vestas Wind Systems, the #1 ranked company in this year's Global 100. The question is, what was the highest impact action your company took in 2021 to accelerate towards a net zero emission system?
Thank you, Toby. First of all, thank you for hosting it, and to you, to JEAN-PASCAL, thanks for passing the baton on. I think it's fair saying two guys that have inspired me in the last couple of years panels, you are the ones. So I'm, on behalf of the team here, of course, super humbled of achieving the prize today. And I can see on our internal communication today, it goes from 29,000 colleagues around, and incredibly pride of receiving it, but also feeling humble about what needs to be done. Investors, we have continued, as you rightly saying, we displaced somewhere around 200 million tons of CO2 each year. I think when we launched our sustainability in everything we do, we are blessed with that the turbine is probably the most sustainable and therefore the most positive from carbon negative product in the world. And when we did that, it was also looking at the circularity, it's the life cycle, but more importantly also how we work with the supply chain performance. And I think when we embarked on the journey in 2000, it is about engaging and activating not only your colleagues inside, but it's more importantly to get now the especially all of our scope 3 partners and suppliers with us. And I think there we have had a fantastic way of engaging those throughout the year. It's now being built in plans, and that means setting a proper example, but also allowing them to team up and partner in some of the R&Ds is just a no-brainer to us, but it's actually also give a safe zone and a safe pair of hands to team up with. And then I think last but not least, talk through visible examples throughout the organization together with your partners. I think that gives visible examples to follow, but it also helps especially political leaders to take those examples and start talking about. So that's what we have done in 21, and we keep accelerating and pushing that also for 22.
Thanks, HENRIK. And next up, we have Jean-Pascal Tricoire, the CEO of Schneider Electric, was #1 corporate citizen, #1 most sustainable company last year. And as many of you will know, Jean-Pascal is a force of nature and has made Schneider Electric, with his teammates, a force of nature for decarbonizing pretty much every sector across the economy. It's an ambitious undertaking that the whole company is focused on. Jean-Pascal, how do you answer this question?
Well, first, Toby, thank you very much for gathering us, because you have created, or you are qualifying, a community with whom it's really stimulating to work together, right? You create the emulation between us. Second point is really big congratulations to HENRIK, and I pass the baton from Mats to HENRIK, and I know because of the past year how encouraging it is for the teams on how it sets actually even more energy to go to the next level. Third point, I would say I like the fact that HENRIK is trying to produce better, and we are helping energy, and we are helping our customers to consume less. So less and better is one of the key elements to go to the net zero trajectory that was described before. If I look at our two big points of focus that were the most ambitious in 2021, well, it was to address our extended ecosystem, and it's not far away from what HENRIK said. So bringing our top suppliers, 1,000 suppliers, into the zero carbon project, helping them to cut their emission by a factor of 2 over the next 5 years. So that's number one. And on the other side, helping our customers to save every year, measured 100 million tons of carbon on their installation. So going really on the two sides of our company on bringing all our ecosystem into that effort to net zero. Second one was to make everything local as possible. We are speaking about the difficulties to travel in the world we are today. We make the difference, of course, with a corporate engagement, but making sure that it's translated locally on the ground, on the field. So really feel honored and privileged to be with you today. Congratulations to HENRIK, and let's keep going. What we are all learning, it's a marathon without a finish line. There is no end, and we can always do better. But we do better if we do it together.
Thanks, Jean-Pascal. And next we have Mads Nipper, the CEO of Ørsted. As many of you know, Ørsted is one of the great transformation stories of our time. Went from just a short time ago, around a decade ago, to being 85% focused in fossil fuels to now over 85% focused on climate solutions. And it's been a phenomenal sort of journey of growth along the way. Mads, how do you answer this question?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Toby. And also from my side, a huge thank you for arranging this, and not least for making this list, because I think it's both an honor for us who are on it, but it's certainly also an inspiration for those who want to be on it. And we need every single cylinder we can click on, so to speak, in terms of getting people to choose a more sustainable path. And also from my side, I said it already to HENRIK, both publicly and privately, but a big congratulations for being the next #1. Now, I would say it may sound strange, but the single biggest thing we did during 2021 was to have our net zero emissions target science approved, because this was scope 1, 2, and 3 by 2040. And we were actually one of only 7 companies in the world, and only one of the single energy company in the world who actually has achieved that with SBTi. Because there's so many lofty targets out there, there's so many ambitions, both from states and from companies. So we really try very hard to be a role model in ensuring that what we do is science-based, because that's the only way we can get to action, because that's when it becomes committed. That is when we have no way around. That is when sort of when we need to do the reductions in reality. And this is something we are immensely proud of having done. And if I am to mention a runner-up, 2021 was also the year where we said that our journey of being towards a world that runs entirely on green energy, that we also announced a net biodiversity positive ambition, apart from rolling out renewable energy, which does, in principle, lots of what HENRIK talks about, and utilizing also his technology. So those would be the couple of the points that I would highlight.
Thanks, Mads. Next up is Esther, and she's the Chief Sustainability Officer for CDL, City Developments Limited, which is has been ranked by Corporate Knights as the most sustainable real estate company in the world. It's doing tremendous things, electrifying their building stock and making them really energy efficient from their base in Singapore. Esther, how do you answer this question?
Hello, and greeting from Singapore. And well, definitely we are really honored, and climbing up the rank from 40th last year to 5th this year. And I still remember 13 years ago when I talked to Toby about this, trying to understand what Global 100 was all about. The world has changed tremendously. And today we are not just talking about low carbon, but also talking about, race to zero. And that was really, the advocacy that we have seen at, COP26. And we were very happy that this year at COP we have one full day which is dedicated to building sector, and the fact is building sectors has a high carbon footprint of about 40% greenhouse gas emission. So actually we have started our sustainability and green building journey more than 2 decades ago. Although we are a small country, and but we still feel that there is something that we can do no matter how small we are, and we can also connect with a larger ecosystem. And we are operating in 29 countries, and we do feel that there is actually a lot we can do to engage the value chain. And what we are really excited that last year, the very first thing, most important thing, is a pledge to the World Green Building Council, advancing net zero and the pathway. And that was actually, we make us the first Singapore and Asia, Southeast Asian companies to adopt this advancing net zero under the World Green Building Council pathway. And during COP, we also, expanded it to commit to the whole life cycle. And that means we look at scope 1, 2, and 3, which was also aligned with, the Science-Based Target Initiative. We actually set the validated target in 2018, aligned with 2 degree. And December, just before New Year, we managed to achieve, to attain the validated target aligned with 1.5. And all these are connected, which is actually our #1 deliverable, that is decarbonization of our business and our product, and how we design, build, and manage our properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. Next up, we have with us MINNA AILA. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer, Senior VP of Sustainability at Neste. And just by way of context, Neste is classified as an oil and gas company. We looked at over 300 oil and gas companies and looked at their capital expenditure plans. Only one of them was allocating more than 50% of their capital expenditure to the decarbonization to low carbon fuels, biofuels, sustainably harvested biofuels. And that company is Neste, which is allocating the vast majority of its CapEx strategy. Also interesting to note, its growth has been phenomenal over the last 5 years relative to the economy and also relative to its sector, even with the sector recovering with the higher prices now. So MINNA, pleasure to have you here with us. How do you answer the question?
Thank you so much, Toby, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. And like Esther was saying, Race to Zero, I would say it's a journey. It's a race that nobody can really win unless everyone finishes. So it's great to be together with the leading companies and of course everyone else who is having the same ambition who didn't make it to the list this year. We're super proud to be on the list for the 16th consecutive year, and it's great to be in this great company. Now, last year, we introduced our new sustainability vision, which includes targets on climate, biodiversity, human rights, as well as our supply chain and raw materials. And on climate, we have 3 targets, 2 on our footprint and then 1 on our handprint. So first, we want to reduce emissions in our own production by 50% by 2030 and reach carbon neutral production by 2035. So those are our scopes 1 and 2. Secondly, we want to reduce a use phase emission intensity of sold products by 50% by 2040 compared to 2020 levels, and work with our suppliers and partners to reduce emissions across our value chain, our scope 3. And then thirdly, on our handprint, we offer solutions that help our customers meet their climate targets and reduce their emissions by at least 20 million tons CO2 equivalent annually by 2030. We've met 10 million tons annual target already, and we're on our way to 20 million tons per year. So last year on scope 1 and 2, we have had over 80 concrete projects ongoing. And for example, using renewable energy in our production, which is a sort of an easy way to start with, we had a target of 100% by 2023. We reached our target 100% in Finland already last year, well ahead of our target date. We've also introduced climate targets as part of our long-term incentives for our senior management. So there's a clear connection between our strategy, between our incentives, and what we're doing on climate. And then we've also updated our investment criteria to include climate impact. So we've introduced internal price for carbon, which is a great driver for making climate-wise decisions. So those are the ones that I would like to highlight from 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, MINNA. We also have with us today CHRISTOPHE BECK, who's the CEO of Ecolab. It's a global leader in hygiene products, something that become front and center, especially given the heightened awareness around infections from these times that we're living in. CHRISTOPHE, can you answer the question that we've all been discussing?
Would love to. Thank you so much, and honored as well to be part of this group for the 4th year. And congratulations, HENRIK, for getting spot 1, and thank you, JEAN-PASCAL, as well, so for showing the way last year as well. It's really, really inspiring. And as you mentioned, Toby, so we're the global leader in water management and infection prevention. So we've been quite busy on both fronts in 2020 and 21, especially on the infection prevention front with COVID, unfortunately. But interestingly enough, climate change has not taken a backseat during that time, which was a big fear we had when the pandemic started. And if anything, so it's taken a more front and center position for most companies. So we've been focusing mostly on water, obviously, with what we do, because we touch 1/3 of the world food production and the world population as well. And I'd mentioned 3 things. The first one is making absolutely sure that we can build credibility with our own operations. So we've committed to the net zero, and we have objective every single year. And we've over-delivered on all of our objective in 2021, including the S and the G as well on ESG, which is really important as well for us. The second is that we've helped our 3 million customers around the world save 200 billion gallons of water, which is enough drinking water for over 700 million people. And my commitment I made at the White House in 2015 was to help save enough for 1 billion people by 2030. So we're well on track for that. And the last thing I'd like to mention is how we've helped shape what's called the Water Resilience Coalition with the United Nations Global Compact. Was kind of a dream in 2020 that came true, to bring the 150 largest companies that are using 1/3 of the world water. Why water matters? Well, because water is driving 10% of carbon emissions, plus all water scarcity and the human impact that has as well. And our objective was to have 150 of those companies join the WRC. 27 we gathered, so in 2021, with companies like Microsoft, Starbucks, Heineken, Cargill, all signing, pledging, and helping fund as well. So well on track here. We've committed as well so to address 100 basins which are water scarce in the world. 11 have been addressed in 2021, and we're on our path as well so to provide water for 300 million people around the world, where we've made great progress as well in 2021. So I hope that many of this group today so will join us as well. You improve climate and you improve water scarcity at the same time.
Thanks, Christophe. Next up, we have HAKAN BULGURLU. He's the CEO of Arçelik, makes white goods appliances based in Turkey. Part of majority of Turkey is in Asia, so part of the rising nations. And HAKAN is a fairly modest guy, but he's written a book about another feat he's accomplished recently that was a bit of a metaphor for the challenge, the summit of sustainability we're all climbing. He recently climbed Mount Everest, but he's down back in his office now. So HAKAN, how do you answer this question?
Thank you, Toby. It really is an honor to be among this sort of global list of climate leaders. You know, for me, as you mentioned, it is a very personal journey as well. And I tried to put it in the book, A Mountain to Climb. And there I'm actually trying to draw attention to what's the state of the world and what we need to do with its solutions. But the journey at Arçelik has been even more interesting. As you're aware, we're carbon neutral. We have been for several years. And for a manufacturing business in appliances, global business, you know, all kinds of emerging markets from Pakistan, South Africa, manufacturing operations in 28 countries, it is not an easy task to become carbon neutral. But we all know that that doesn't really mean much. And when I think back to what do I mean by not mean much, it's nowhere near enough. I mean, being carbon neutral in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions is a nice start maybe, but that's it. 2021, we actually confirmed our SBTi targets in line with 1.5 degrees, which means we have now committed to cut our Scope 3 emissions by more than 50% by 2030. Simply put, the technologies to do that don't exist today. We're just saying that we're going to commit more capital and more human resources to actually solving the problems and making our appliances consume less energy, less water, etc. I'm particularly proud of this because when we started, I was hearing the word impossible a lot. And in 2021, I witnessed a change in our teams from saying impossible to why don't we push it further? And I found myself trying to slow things down a little bit. Basically, it's become the single purpose of our existence. And I'm really proud of that achievement on behalf of the whole team. And of course, being on your list is acknowledgement, which is something very, very valuable to us. Something else we've, started using as a tool at the company, which may be useful to my colleagues here, is that this abstract term of a date, 2030, 2040, puts too much distance between us and what needs to be done. So we've actually started measuring our progress in terms of decarbonizing on a weekly basis, because ultimately there's 415 weeks left to 2030. When you say 415 weeks, it's not much. And I think it brings it home a bit. And we've also started following, because our net zero commitments require something that is not really possible in terms of Scope 3 emission reductions in our business, we are now actually starting to look at a carbon balance sheet to make sure that we're investing in mitigating in carbon credit creation projects as well. So it's a new way of looking at the business. We now have a P&L and a carbon P&L that we look at, balance sheet that we look at. And I think it's a good way to frame all the change that needs to happen. Proud to be on your list. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Hakan. I'm reading your book right now to my 5-year-old son, and he wants to go climb Mount Everest next summer, but I told him he has to wait till at least 10.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him about it.
Next up, we have with us from Hong Kong, Roberto Guidetti, who's the CEO of Vitasoy. He's really blazing a trail with his company, but also within the sector as we move from carbon-intensive animal protein to plant-based proteins, particularly in the beverage sector. Roberto?
Toby, thank you for having us, first of all, and a real honor to be with such leaders, such inspiring leaders today. At Vitasoy, our purpose is to accelerate the transition to a low-carbon, plant-based diet. And as per IPCC, moving to a plant-based diet could contribute to a carbon reduction of up to 8 billion tons per year by 2050, which is around 15% of the total. So our 2021 highest impact action was to accelerate investment and innovation in our plant milk portfolio. So we expanded oat milk in all of our markets. We added a new soy oat almond milk platform in Singapore and Southeast Asia, and support that with progress on the TCFD recommendations by more renewable energy in our factories, less impact on packaging, and also helping our contract farms to manage carbon emissions of agricultural raw materials with soy, oats, and almond. For perspective, the global plant milk and meat consumption is projected to grow at 6%, 15% respectively per year in the next 5 years. But the present combined market size is still very small, at around $30 billion a year, versus the $1 trillion+ per year alternatives. So to grow faster, we need more commercial investments, and we also need to move from the current Western market skew to a more inclusive progress with higher growth in Asia. Asia is the region with the biggest population, so this is where the solutions can make the biggest global impact. There are some trade-offs. The trade-off for us is to drive this transformation while absorbing the extra costs that we are incurring in the short term, and there are three kinds of extra costs. First of all, R&D. We need to improve the product experience, and also we need to improve the affordability of the products that when we serve. The second costs are marketing, to provide awareness, education, and trial, to address some of the existing perceptions on product performance. And third, sales infrastructure to secure availability. Now, the good news is that we can support most of these investments via the cost savings in water and energy reduction that we drove as part of our ESG performance.
Thanks, Roberto. That's inspiring, and your product is tasty as well, which brings us to the next speaker, Lawrence KURZIUS, the CEO of McCormick & Co. Most of you will have eaten something from McCormick & Co., whether today or yesterday. They're the central player in the spice market, and they put decarbonization at the heart of their business model, and also making the growers and the pickers of the spices partake in the success by taking out the middle people and establishing co-ops so that there's more flat pathways to market for the folks who are actually getting the product. But Lawrence, we love, my family loves your spices. The roasted garlic and red pepper is a staple. We eat it every day. But we really love your spices, and we're happy you're here today. How do you answer this question?
Well, Toby, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for that plug of our products. And I hope that everyone on this call has also enjoyed a McCormick product at some point today, whether they know it or not. We supply the seasoning systems to most of the food industry worldwide as well, as a flavor company, in addition to our consumer products. So we actually have a pretty big impact. You know, at McCormick, we have long understood the urgency to mitigate climate change, and we've taken a lot of action over the years, some of which you just highlighted. You know, we've organized our farming communities, many thousands, tens of thousands of smallholder farmers. into cooperatives and other groups. Our agronomists work with them on sustainable agricultural practices, which go straight to the heart of many of the world's climate challenges. And we're very proud of that work. And although deforestation isn't central to our business issues, we recognize that many of the countries in which we do business, deforestation is a real problem. And so we've contributed significantly to planting trees, notably in Madagascar and Indonesia, where we've had huge planting programs. Like some of the others on this call, our biggest move this year was, in fact, moving to a 1.C degree commitment by 2030. We've long had a 2 degree C commitment, but this year we like others, that 2 degrees looked like it was impossible when we signed up for it, and then it started to look not ambitious enough. So we signed on to a business ambition for 1.5 degrees C. We joined the UN Global Compact and we're designated a lead company, and we're pleased to be recognized also as a Terra Carta company, partly related to making that commitment. We've made that commitment science-based. So we're doing all of the additional things that are required to get there. And we've also formally announced the net zero commitment by 2050. The only thing that's held us back on that is making sure that we had a real science-based path to get there, which we do. We've, in addition to the work in agriculture and sourcing, we've made investments in net zero facilities that we've continued to build through the pandemic time. We have 2 major facilities, one of the largest condiment facilities in the world in the UK, and a nearly 2 million square foot distribution center in the US that will open this year, both of which are net zero facilities, and we're very proud of that. We've expanded the use of renewable energy, which now powers most of our large facilities in the US at least, and more worldwide. And taking this work with suppliers to another level, because you have to work with your suppliers to get your Scope 3 emission targets. We're a convening member of a pre-competitive alliance that we formed with PepsiCo and Mars to leverage our combined strength to drive climate action through a supply chain collective action that we call supplier leadership on climate transition, to partner together to equip our suppliers with the knowledge and the tools that they need to begin their own climate journey, and thereby get to those Scope 3 emission targets. That's probably enough for me right now.
Thanks, Lawrence. And the last word on this question is from George Oliver. Many of us are probably in buildings now with systems that Johnson Controls, which is the company that George is CEO of, has built. Johnson Controls is in the efficiency business, as JEAN-PASCAL was talking about doing less better. How do you answer this question, George?
Yeah, let me start by thanking you, Toby, for leading this terrific discussion. It's certainly an honor to be here today in such good company. It is clear from the previous panelists that driving sustainability and tackling climate change is a collective effort, and there is no time to waste. And I believe there's shared understanding that global warming risks are real and increasing, and that its climate change is costly and impacts can be irreversible. At Johnson Controls, sustainability is our business, and we have a very important role to play in the net zero transition, since we build the operating and digital solutions that can tackle almost 40% of the global CO2 emissions coming from buildings. And the good news is that technologies exist today that will enable us to bend the carbon emissions curve to reach net zero by 2050. Through our Open Blue technology, our digital platform, we can drive 50% and more in improvement in energy efficiency and in the corresponding carbon emissions. And for our own operations, since 2002, we've cut our greenhouse gas intensity by some 70%. And so in 2021, we raised the bar further on ourselves and launched a comprehensive set of new commitments across ES and G. On Scope 1 and 2, for example, we pledged to cut our carbon emissions by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Climate Agreement goal. And we aim to cut our operational emissions by 55% and reduce our customers' emissions by 16% before 2030. And Johnson Controls also recently became the first industrial company to issue an integrated sustainable finance framework. And as part of this integrated sustainable finance framework, we further committed to achieving ambitious absolute emission reductions by 2025. Last, in 2021, we also launched our OpenBlue Net Zero Buildings as a Service, which is a turnkey solution to deliver decarbonization outcomes for our customers with no need for upfront capital cost and with guaranteed fixed operating costs. And last, in addition, we're devoting at least 75% of our new product R&D spend to advancing sustainability and climate action. And we've tied our executive compensation to meeting these commitments. So being named among the top 100 most sustainable companies, this is the 8th time for Johnson Controls, and it's an incredible honor for our entire team of 100,000 colleagues across the globe, and evidence of our ongoing commitment to lead the way to a low carbon economy. So again, thank you for inviting me today, and look forward to our continued discussion here.
Thanks, George, and thanks all for sharing your wisdom. You all packed a lot of wisdom into a small amount of time. The sort of 6 points that seem like takeaways for me. One, that what Johan raised is the shift away from fossil fuels to renewables is well underway. We've turned that corner, and we really need to speed up, because that's at the center of almost everything, especially as we electrify almost everything. The point that JEAN-PASCAL made about doing less better was reinforced by Esther in terms of making buildings as efficient as possible. And George, you reinforced that as well. And then some of the secular shifts we're seeing, like what we've seen happen in energy, we're seeing now happen to food, the shift away from carbon-intensive animal protein to plant protein, the potential 8 billion tons of avoided emissions annually that could produce, that really brought into clear focus by Roberto. So thanks for that. That the food system is key, and only a few countries have food systems at the heart of their climate targets, including importantly China, which is heartening to see. And then we heard about the great work that all of you are doing, and I was doing a quick tally about the amount of emissions that end up getting avoided just through your products and services each year, and it's upwards of about 500 million tons per year just from your companies here, these 10 companies. So really setting a standard. That's a huge 500 million tons a year of avoided emissions, huge contribution, and your examples promise billions more. So really nice to see that. And then HAKAN's point as well around the need to really get short term. You know, we've always been talking about thinking long term. That's what a lot of us have done, and why a lot of us are here, and why we come from our origins to where we are now. But right now, it's really about the here and now, and really thinking, you know, we have 450 weeks between now and 2030, and the weekly basis, the weekly greenhouse gas emissions check-in, so important. So really nice to hear that short-term emphasis with the long-term target in mind always. And then the different points we heard from MINNA around tying executive compensation, also George, and it's happening in almost all your companies, to these critical targets that are now at the core of the business. And then critically, the money trail. You're all investing the majority of your capex in growing these solutions to great results for your teams, and also for people who are lucky enough to be shareholders. So really heartening to hear these points, and also to see the deeds that you do and your team does daily to back these up. So really quite inspiring. We have about 10 minutes left with 10 speakers, and we have one final rapid fire advice we would love to get your insight in. And this is insights for other leaders, both in business and in public policy. We'll go the same order. What is your single most important piece of advice for business and political leaders to close their say-do gap when it comes to climate commitments versus action? HENRIK, you're up.
I'm ready. Let's go. Yeah. So first of all, to the political leaders, I would say decarbonizing electricity is a key condition, and also decarbonizing the broader energy landscape is absolutely key. That means scale up renewable energy by simplifying permitting processes, expanding grid infrastructure, and driving electrification in general. From a business leader's point of view, I will just say we have to start with ourselves, set the good example. That means we are large companies and we are the ones that can set and also pull a lot of our partners with us as a good example. And I will just say two things. I think here, Professor Rockstrom exactly try to go back and have the little bit the KPI for societies and countries. Do we actually on a rolling 12 months basis put enough actual permitting out that also supports that 2030, 2040, and 2050. And unfortunately, in many countries, we then operate that we will achieve it in 2105, and that's not good enough. And by last, should anyone sit there and miss some carbon displacement, we are not sold out by turbines, so I'm happy to have any conversations after this panel as well. Thanks, Toby.
Thanks, HENRIK. Jean-Pascal?
I won't repeat all the credo about decarbonization through electrification of that was just professed. But I would say for each of the business leaders, revisit, transform our business so that performance and sustainability feed each other. The trap very often, or the ultimate line of resistance, is to oppose sustainability to the performance of company. Sustainability is about more efficiency, and efficiency is good for your performance on your economics. And the second thing, in a world where countries are very different, where communities are not the same, my advice is to empower your local teams to really act locally in symbiosis with their local ecosystem. Empower your people. Thanks,
Jean-Pascal. Mads?
Yes, thank you very much, and very much to HENRIK's point. I mean, the world's energy system, production and use of energy is 73% of the world's emissions, so that is at the very heart of it. And working for a company who literally has transformed from a very fossil fuel intensive company to now 90+% renewables and having reduced our emissions already by 86%, we are well on track. And we actually today celebrating that that for the fourth year in a row, we're the world's most sustainable energy company. We actually making a publication of getting on track with all the best advice for governments and businesses. So sounding like an old salesman, which I happen to be, go to orsted.com and read it. It's a 10-minute read, and that's sort of summarizes the last decade of experience that we have built through our transformation.
Thanks, Matt. Esther?
Well, sustainability is a very complex issue. If I can just simplify it in ABCD, A is to align our business and also ESG action with global goals to future-proof our business. And B, make it a business case, because without creating business value for your company, your ecosystem of value chain, investors and employees, you will not be able to sustain the practices. C, we need to care for the planet. Without a healthy planet, there's no healthy people and market for business to thrive. And last but not least, the disclosure is very important. And we need to be transparent, we need to be prompt, because there are rising expectation of investors, regulators, and consumer, and the world is very transparent. And well, ABCD, thank you.
Thanks, Esther. MINNA?
Thank you. Two things. First, this may sound very simple, but I would just say stop greenwashing. Setting ambitious goals is very important, but companies and countries alike, we must shift the focus from ambitions to actions, from plans to projects, from dreams to details. And then secondly, put your money where your mouth is, make those investments, support those businesses and countries that are on that path. That's it.
Great. Christophe?
Well, I'd like to build on what Jean-Pascal said, probably with the same accent as well, so this French accent. It's challenging this concept of green premium. We always think that being more sustainable means more cost, more investments. At the end of the day, it's a good business story. There's higher return if you're more sustainable. So it's kind of challenging this concept of green premium. And second, there is no way to decarbonize the world without reducing our water usage as well. And as the CEO of Unilever told me one day in Davos, by the way, well, if climate change were a shark, water would be its teeth, because that's going to be the first impact we're going to feel, and it's the best way to drive carbon down too.
Yeah, the water climate nexus. HAKAN?
Yeah, I mean, I want to bring it home and make it a bit more personal, maybe, because if you don't live what you're saying and what you're expecting your business to do, it's very, very difficult to get traction. And I think our personal lives and the adjustments we make in our own choices of consumption and the way we live, I think is critical. And as business leaders, we need to lead by example here more than ever relevant. Also, to business leaders, I would like to say this fear of regulation, which is kind of ingrained in the capitalistic system that regulation is bad, is wrong in this case. We need to actually encourage regulation all around the world. We can't sit in a world where Europe is a good example with the Green Deal, which is a good deal, by the way, when most of the developing world is, growing emissions dramatically and will continue to do so in the absence of those good examples being implemented. So I think business needs to embrace regulation more, and we have to lead as examples for our teams going forward.
Thanks, HAKAN. Be the change you want to see. Roberto?
There is an opportunity to focus on and also role model proactive end solutions instead of reactive compliance and incrementalism. And in doing so, work together with policymakers and businesses to change the system and accelerate the climate solutions to meet the Paris agreements, including Asian intensity in our plans.
Thanks. Lawrence?
Others have already said it, but I'll say it too, that there has to be a business case for your sustainability program. If it's seen as a trade-off between profits and sustainability, then your program itself can't be sustainable. And use a materiality assessment to determine where you can really make a difference that actually improves your business and get a real benefit of either growth or cost or competitive advantage of some sort from your sustainability program, or you're probably doing the wrong things. Maybe the one thought that hasn't been said is that the best employees want to work for companies that are part of the solution. And so your sustainability efforts are also a great magnet for talent.
Thanks. George?
Yeah, Toby, summarizing many of the other comments, I think sustainability is no longer an opt-in for the world's companies. I think it does need to be part of the business case and then the DNA across your organization. There's really no time to waste and no reason to wait. In our sector, in the building sector in particular, there's technology today that ultimately can solve the problem, and waiting threatens the climate and wastes money. And action, by contrast, protects the climate as well as the bottom line. So cutting emissions cuts waste and costs while creating good jobs and ultimately spurring growth. So let's all continue to do the good work we're doing and be able to bring everyone along with us, because it's making a difference.
Thanks. I just really want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who joined us today, all of you for leading the way, and the teams behind you that are helping you to be proactive and show how this non-incremental systemic leaps can be made. And this idea that sustainability is not a trade-off, it's a trade-up, and it's time to put our money where our mouths are, which is what each one of your companies is doing and leading by example. And when we do that, we're going to attract the best people, and we're going to get much better results, and things can snowball in a really good way. So we'll be back the week of April 22nd. That whole week, we'll be doing a global series, bringing together leaders from the different G7 plus BRICS nations. We'll be working with you guys in the lead ups. Mads, thanks for putting together that excellent resource. And again, congratulations, HENRIK, for you and your team at Vestas and everyone here. And we look forward to working together to speed up our solutions and get to somewhere that we can be proud to leave our grandchildren. So thank you kindly, and have a great week, and stay safe.